What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others. Hey, hero community. We are looking to feature more amazing social impact heroes on our show, and I'll bet all you listeners out there know a few that deserve to be recognized. If you or anyone you know should be on our radar, then you absolutely have to nominate them to be an iSpark Change social impact hero. Just click the link in the show notes below to help us find out about more people that are doing great things. Hello, what is up? Welcome to the first edition of the iSpark Change podcast. I am super excited to be here with you all today, and I can't wait to dive into this first episode, which is, unfortunately, all about me, because you're not going to be listening to this podcast unless you know who the host is. And I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. I'm the CEO and founder of iSpark Change, and welcome to the iSpark Change podcast. So when asked that question, who am I? Sometimes it's really a tough one because a lot of people, they identify with their career, or they identify with something that they do in life, their hobbies or their experiences. And for me, the big one is really family. And I'd say that before I created iSpark Change and got into that, which I'll share in a little bit, I mean, I've been a family guy through and through, and not in the sense of Peter Griffin, by the way, but a family guy in the sense of that I love my family and they are, my everything. And for the first half of my life, I'd say that I've been about three things, and those things are family, faith, and love. And I had never really thought about how those things became a part of my life. And it wasn't until a couple years ago in 2019 when my father and hero had passed away at the age of 96. He'd lived a long, great life. And when I was writing his eulogy, I realized that those were the three tenets that he lived by: family, faith, and love. And those were the things that he imparted into me all those years. And they're really what has made me the person that I am today. And as I said, that's how it's been for the first half of my life. And I know it will be a big part of, the second half of my life. But it starts with family. So I have my beautiful wife, Tanya, who I've been married to for 25 years in 2021. And we love each other more today than we ever have. At least that's what I tell her. Hopefully she believes me. And we have three beautiful daughters, Ciara, Kinsey, and Haley. And as I said, they've been my life. We started a family at a young age, living in Southern California. And, we didn't really know what we were doing when we started having kids. We got married, and soon after we found out Tanya was pregnant, and we were scared, didn't know what to do. And we said, hey, we're just going to dive in head first and see how it goes. And we made a ton of mistakes along the way, and we learned a lot along the way. But I think she'd admit that we did a pretty good job, and she's a wonderful individual, as are Kinsey and Haley. But I think early in life, I learned that purpose was important, and having a family really helps to give you purpose. but I never really knew what my purpose was. I knew family was important, like I said, but I didn't know that they were going to be the key driver of my life. Because when I was a young guy, I was selfish, I was cocky. I had always been involved in competitive sports and had an ego, and was really about myself in many ways at that young age. And it wasn't until you're holding that little body that you had created, that little infant that you had created, that you realize that, okay, I better get my crap together. And that's where I started really focusing on family. And as a young man, as I said, I'm doing the best I can with Tanya, and we're raising our young family and living in Southern California. And my story really took a turn in about 20 years ago, when my kids were really small, because it was one rainy Sunday afternoon when we had gone down to Los Angeles. It was a couple hours south of where we lived, and we had gone down for a birthday party. Now, it was some kid's birthday party. I couldn't tell you who that was. If you pay me $1 million, I couldn't tell you whose party that was, because it doesn't really matter. But what matters is what happened after the party, because as we left on this Sunday afternoon to drive back home, and we're heading north, and we're driving on the 118 freeway just north of Los Angeles, and it starts raining really, really hard. Now I live in Texas, and that kind of rain is kind of commonplace, but back then in California, it wasn't very common. And it was raining so hard that the wipers couldn't clear the water from the windshield, so you could barely see. And we see cars pulling over, and they decide that, it looks like they're going to wait it out, but we don't know how long it's going to last. It doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. And Tanya and I talk about it, and we contemplate stopping, but it's getting late. It's early evening, and we're worried that it's going to get dark, and then it's going to be even worse to travel in the rain. So we decided to continue on slow. And probably some of that arrogance that I talked about earlier had something to do with it. But we decide to continue on slowly. And I'm driving in the slow lane, and all of a sudden we hit a puddle, and I lose complete control of the vehicle, and we start spinning out of control. And we're in the slow lane, and we spin across 4 lanes to the left, and we're about to hit the center divider, and I'm screaming, and Tanya's screaming, and the girls were asleep in the back, and I don't know what's going on with them at this point, but I'm just terrified. And I'm frantically, trying to remember what I learned in driver's education all those years ago, and I'm pressing on the brake or the gas and trying to steer. And all of a sudden, miraculously, we don't hit the center divider, and we start spinning back the other direction. And we spin back across 4 lanes the other way. And we go up a dirt embankment, and we hit a brick wall at high speed, and we flip completely over, and we land back on the wheels. And the windshield is shattered, and the roof is smashed down to our heads, and the right side is all smashed in, and the windows on that side are smashed. And I quickly turn to Tanya and see if she's okay. And my daughters are now crying, but they seem okay. And I look, and there's no blood, even though there's glass everywhere. Nobody's bleeding. And we're able to crawl out of, we get the kids out, and we get them out of the passenger side, and we crawl out, and we make our way to the side of the road, and this elderly couple had pulled over, and the lady grabs this big blanket out of the trunk, and she wraps it around Tanya, and Tanya's just holding Ciara and Kinsey, and they're just about 1 and 4 at the time. Haley wasn't even born yet, and she's just holding them as tight as she can, and crying and thanking God that they're okay and they're still alive, and just, what had happened. And I'm talking to the gentleman, and he says, I can't believe that you got out of the car. I can't believe that you're not dead. And he proceeds to tell me that's the most incredible thing that he's ever witnessed in his life. And he thought for sure we were dead. I mean, he had called 911, and ambulance, came, and they took us to the hospital, and the car was towed off. It was obviously undrivable. And they took us to the hospital, and I'm thinking, that the ER doctor didn't even want to examine the girls. He's like, they're fine. There's not a scratch on them. They're okay. And I forced him to check out the girls. And then my sister comes to pick us up, and my daughter, Kinsey, she won't get in the car because she's just terrified. And I start thinking, wow, this was really something traumatic. And over the next few days, I start to really assess what had happened and reflect on the experience. And the next day, I get a ride from my father-in-law down to the impound place to get our things out of the vehicle. And my black Grand Prix is sitting on a flatbed tow truck out in the front. And I go inside and I speak to the attendant, and I say, hey, I need to get my things out of the car. And he says, which car? And I said, the black Grand Prix that's on the flatbed. And he looks me square in the eye and he says, that's not your car. And I said, yes, that's my car. The Grand Prix is mine. He says, no, there's no way that's your car, because whoever was driving that car is dead. Or, whoever was driving that car is in the hospital at least. That can't be your car. And I, have to convince him that it's my car, and he, show my identification. And finally he lets me, and I get my things. And as we're driving back, I'm really thinking, wow, if this is a person that obviously has experience, and he's, saying how, crazy that car looked, and it really caused me to reflect. And that arrogant guy that I went through a period of, not being so strong, where I decided to write about it, and I wrote down a list of things that I wanted to live my life by. And I called them my to-do list for every day. Things like living every day like it's the last day of your life, and doing unto others as you want them to treat you, and being grateful, and being present, and not harmful of others, and loving my family. And that list really gave me guidance. It really gave me guidance, back then when I was struggling, and has for the past 20 years. And during that period of reflection is when I realized that, those key tenets that I discussed from the beginning, the family and faith and love, were a part of who I am and who I would be for my whole life. And when I continued to reflect, it really made me lean on that faith. And my mother was so adamant that a guardian angel had protected us, and said that it was a guardian angel that had, shielded us in the vehicle. And so she gave me this tiny little guardian angel pin, this little gold guardian angel pin to put on the visor of my car. And one day, as I was out at work, and I'm sitting in my car, and I'm staring up, looking at that guardian angel pin, and all of a sudden, I'm kind of daydreaming or dreaming, I'm not really sure. And all of a sudden, this idea for a story hits me like I had just watched a movie. And I realized, I say, wow, that's a pretty crazy story. I need to do something with this. So I end up writing about a page, and then I go about life, and I never do anything with that story. And then you fast forward to March of 2020, when the pandemic had started and the world had shut down, and people are in crisis, and people don't know what they're going to do. And I'm getting anxious and uncertain, because my business had slowed down, and I had had to resign as the COO of one of my clients, and I all of a sudden have nearly no revenue and a mortgage and a family to take care of, and I start getting worried and fearful. And then I lean on those things that I know about, on my family, on my faith, and on love, and I think, you know what? I am not as bad off as many others, and I need to help others, and I need to do my part and support people, because there's people that are suffering far worse than I am. And so I start to write, and I write a blog called How to Use the Pandemic as an Opportunity. And in there, I talk about, how to be grateful for what you have, and how to help others and serve them, and use the time that God has given you as a blessing. And then I quickly realized that I need to take my own advice. So I say, you know what? It's time to write that story. It's time to write that story that had been put in my head 20 years ago. And so in April of 2020, I start writing the book 12 Hours of Heaven, what would become 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World. And I start writing based off the vision that I had in my head 20 years ago. And I just start going about it methodically. And I Google how to write a book, and it says you should write consistently every day, and you should write 500 to 1,000 words a day if you can, and just keep going about it. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And thankfully I had time, because we were all in lockdown. And I start writing, and I start writing my 500 to 1,000 words a day. And then about the beginning of June, everything changed. And that's when I think, someone higher up had bigger plans for me, because I start writing about this spiritual content, because 12 Hours of Heaven is a fictional story about an angel that is sent down from heaven to help people on earth. And in my fictional story, I start relating to the characters, and we start relating to their struggles and the struggles that I've had in life. And I realize that I'm going into a very connected place spiritually. And I started having dreams and visions and creativity like you would not believe, and like I had never had before in my life. And I realized that I was being given a gift, and my writing flourished. I went from writing, 500 words in a day to writing over 2,000, writing a whole chapter in a few hours. And I finished my book in just a month later, on the anniversary of my father's death, and then was able to get the book published in a couple months, and had the book out in October of 2020. But the story really didn't end there, because in that time of reflection, and that time of those dreams and visions, I felt called to do more than just write a book. I felt called to do more to help people, to inspire them, to motivate them, to help improve the world that was suffering. And that's where the idea for I Spark Change was born. And I Spark Change, the purpose of I Spark Change is to empower and connect humanity to elevate their social impact and spread positive change around the world, essentially to make the world a better place. And that's when I realized that I would devote my life to making the world a better place. And what way, shape, or form that would take, I didn't know. But I knew that I was creating I Spark Change, and I was going to work on it for the rest of my life. And so in fall of 2020, I started iSpark Change, and we started growing the community, having a community online, building a website, building a team, having some gracious interns that I found that could help me, Lady and David, and then doing everything I could to spread that message and spread positive change. And over the past year and a half in growing iSpark Change, I kept feeling another calling, and a calling to do more to get that message out. And that's what brings me here to the iSpark Change podcast. And that's what has led me to this point in my life. And I'm going to do my best to share my gifts of family and faith and love on this podcast, and share my tenets of, to love and to give and to serve. And the, I know I'm a flawed individual, but as one of my mentors likes to say, we're all flawed and we're all awesome. We're all flawsome. And so I'm going to share my flawsomeness with you, share my vulnerabilities and share who I am. And we'll have episodes that'll be all about positive change in our world. And that's what I've devoted my life to. And that's what I'm going to continue to do so with the iSpark Change podcast and beyond. So I look forward to having you on this journey with me. I look forward to having you be a part of the iSpark Change podcast. So thank you for listening. Now go out there and spark some change on your own, and God bless you. Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.